Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and rumors of my death due to the coronavirus have been greatly exaggerated. I have been under the weather the last couple of days. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but I am slowly getting back into the saddle, and so one of the first things I wanted to do was release a video because, as always, and as you know, I probably have a lot to say on everything. Excuse me. And today we are actually talking about Twitter. Now, this is coming from various sources. This news comes out today, but I'm cribbing primarily from TechCrunch here, which I'll get into in a moment. But let's set the background on this, for Twitter. Now, last year, Twitter expanded its rules around hate speech to include what it calls dehumanizing speech against religious groups. Today, March 5th, Twitter said it's expanding its rule to include language that dehumanizes people on the basis of their age, disability, or disease. Now, some are saying that the quote-unquote disease aspect of this is by virtue of the spread of the coronavirus or COVID-19 that obviously is leading people to make hateful and sometimes racist remarks on Twitter and most likely other platforms as well, basically related to this virus, especially since it seems to be centered around China. And as it's spreading, I've read a lot of reports on basically the backlash against Asian communities in multiple countries, which is horribly unfortunate. Now, here we go with this, and some of these rules are actually a bit retroactive for Twitter. Now, Twitter has said that any tweet that broke this rule prior to today will need to be deleted by the user, but they're not going to result in basically account suspensions or banning since these rules were not in place at the time. In other words, they're pretty much going to give you, and I don't know what that grace period is, a grace period to delete anything that may be out of that scope, or rather now within the blanket of this new rule. Any tweets published from now on will have to abide by this hateful conduct policy, the hateful conduct policy, and by virtue of that could get you suspended or worse if you are basically putting something out there that says that. Now, this policy, this overarching policy that they have about hateful conduct, quote unquote hateful conduct, basically means that if you are promoting violence or making threats, as well as the use of hateful imagery and display names. And so you can't have, let's say, a Twitter handle or a display name that is considered hateful conduct in any one of these categories, or post any images, memes and the like that may be disparaging, or obviously talking about promoting violence or making threats against any of these groups. Now, what was already in place prior to this expansion was a ban on dehumanizing speech across the categories of race, ethnicity, national origin, caste, if you're in a country with a caste system, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity. And so now we've expanded into age, disease, disability, and religion was last year. Now, some examples of this, with this, and while this rule is retroactive, as it is for Facebook and all of that, and the reason, and before I get to the examples, one of the reasons why these things tend to be retroactive, in other words, as they are policing it. So let's assume I put out some kind of hateful conduct tweet that falls under one of these categories. The problem is that there's a massive volume of tweets every day, every minute, same with Facebook and all of the others. And so Twitter has been heavily criticized for not enforcing its policies and allowing online abuse to continue, since it really is relying on the community, meaning you and me and anybody else that's on Twitter at large, to flag what it considers offensive or violating these policies. And so some of these examples of the new policies that Twitter put out are, and I quote, "All age group are leeches and don't deserve any support from us." That is now considered hateful conduct. "People with disease, X-disease, are rats that contaminate everybody around them." Another one for disability is "People with X disability are subhuman and shouldn't be seen in public." And finally, X-religious group should not be punished, X-religious group should be punished. We are not doing enough to rid us of those filthy animals. Those are all examples of what Twitter can basically deems hateful conduct. Now, here are my thoughts on this. And quite frankly, the reason why I'm using TechCrunch is because the author, Sarah Perez, summed up perfectly for me what I've actually been saying for years, just in various ways, but she says it very succinctly. So to quote Miss Perez, and I quote, Unfortunately, Twitter's larger problem is that it has operated for years as a public town square where users have felt relatively free to express themselves without using a real identity where they're held accountable for their words and actions. There are valid cases for online anonymity, including how it allows people to more freely communicate under oppressive regimes, for example, but the flip side is that it emboldens some people to make statements that they otherwise wouldn't without any social repercussions. That's not how it works in the real world. And I think that's absolutely correct. So for example, when many of these platforms, for example, are tightening their rules, they then get accused of censorship or violating, at least here in America, the First Amendment. And this is why we've seen an explosion of alternative platforms spring up. If you're thinking about this, because if we start to lose that anonymity, there's going to be a lot of people that, who normally wouldn't say things that are horribly hateful, if they knew they could be taken to task for it or found online. And there are groups dedicated to tracking down some people that have said very hateful things and trying to identify or dox them in the real world. And so while I've seen these things spring up, these alternative platforms where a lot of these users basically migrate to, and while I've been personally on the receiving end of basically hate tweeting, and it's on occasion for my posts here where somebody, disagrees with a video or audio, I have one Twitter account, it has my name on it as part of my public, branding or my public self, if you will. And so you can go back to the very beginning and read everything that I've ever tweeted. I don't think I've ever deleted anything off of it, nor would I really want to. I'm not really saying hate things, but I do get attacked on occasion for videos like this, where I'm being called a whole bunch of horrible stuff. But I will be honest, quite frankly, it is nothing, absolutely nothing compared to the rage I've seen on these alternative platforms when I post the exact same content, the exact same wording, and all of this. So if I'm posting to my primary core social media like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., basically the verbiage for my video or my podcast is exactly the same as it is on these smaller alternative platforms that oftentimes just automatically hook into YouTube or SoundCloud and just copy the information over to wherever they are. And I think that's a huge problem because they don't hold back. They're all anonymous. It is a lot more decentralized oftentimes. And so it would be harder for a group to track down and dox these people. Not that I am supporting of doxing in any way, shape, or form, but I think there's a balance here that needs to be struck between, having, let's say, a civil conversation saying, let's say I have a concern about one thing or the other without it turning into some kind of racist tirade or, biased tirade in that sense. And I think that we need to understand that there should be a certain amount of decorum here without violating anybody's ability to say their mind or at least question, whatever they want to question. So those are my thoughts of the day. Please feel free to disagree with me. I have no doubt I will get some rage tweets or definitely some rage hate on these smaller platforms, but that is your news of the day, and I am glad to be alive and with you here on this Thursday. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.